While you were contemplating your 2022 resolutions, Lindiwe Sisulu was probably making her famous activist parents turn on their graves with her unprecedented attack on our constitution and black judges. But the country didn't take it lying down. Meanwhile, Oxfam has released a report showing that the world's richest people doubled their wealth during the pandemic. Those stories and more await you in this update of empowering, easy to understand news brought to you by Verashni Pillay and the explain.co.za team.
It's time for your weekly wrap of this week's top stories, brought to you by explain.co.za. Simple news summaries for busy people. Our take.
Each year, thousands of elites descend on Davos, a mountain resort in Switzerland, for the World Economic Forum. As the BBC puts it, the event usually draws out corporate and political leaders, celebrities, campaigners, economists, and journalists for panel discussions, drinks, parties, and smooching. But COVID-19 has intervened. The 2022 in-person event is deferred to the European summer. This week's participants will gather online for the World Economic Forum calls the Davos Agenda, a headline series of State of the World sessions. It's probably just as well the protesters who usually flock to Davos to express their disdain for the whole shindig are going to be extra mad this year. Oxfam has released a new report showing that the wealth of the world's 10 richest men doubled during the pandemic. Yes, men, and all of them are white. The charity's chief executive said, "This year, what's happening is off the scale. There's been new billionaires created almost every day during this pandemic. Meanwhile, 99% of the world's population goes worse off." The situation is deeply unjust, but as a society, we can't seem to muster the collective political will to reverse the rapacious form of capitalism gone mad. Why? Well, we like the thoughts of one South African Twitter user responding to the report. Zamandlovo says, "Things gone terribly wrong because everyone's socialized to believe that with enough meditation and hard work, this could be them. It's hard to galvanize political momentum to reverse this inequality. Our obsession with individualism deepens with each new generation. From Gen X to Z, we are told by rappers, politicians, and influencers that we too can become one of the obscenely wealthy few. It's time to put that lie to bed and commit to raising a new generation of champions to collective good above becoming wildly successful and famous at the expense of others."
The big story.
Most of us were still jotting down our New Year's resolutions when Minister of Tourism Lindiwe Sisulu decided to dust off an old chestnut that the Constitution is to blame for the government's failings. In a fiery initial op-ed and subsequent responses, these had less to do with the sea of African poverty, she bemoans, and more to do with Sisulu clearly launching her campaign to challenge Cyril Ramaphosa as ANC president by aligning herself with the more radical economic transformation faction under former President Jacob Zuma. In the original article published on Iqbal Survey's largely discredited Independent Online, Sisulu accused black judges of being determined to deny poor South Africans economic justice, adding that many were worse than apartheid-era judges. The same judiciary, mind you, has often gone to bat to hold the government to account for its poor treatment of poor South Africans. Thankfully, some of South Africa's strongest minds, including Acting Chief Justice Raymond Zondo and stalwart Mavuso Msingane and his own sister-in-law and activist, Eleanor Sisulu, issued robust rebuttals. Msimang noted rightfully that the executive arm of government, Sisulu's cabinet rather than the judiciary, is responsible for poverty alleviation. The consensus was that Sisulu shouldn't moan about economic justice, considering she's been a high-ranking politician in government for nearly 30 years. Ramaphosa also responded in his usually annoyingly subtle manner, using his weekly newsletter to defend the Constitution and the judiciary. One of Sisulu's complaints is that the judiciary, using the constitution and much of its debated property clause, has stalled land reform. But we, as we've previously noted, land experts say that's simply not the case. And no less than Minister General of Justice, Ronald Lamola, agrees, as he put it in a Business Day op-ed following Sisulu's comments, in quoting former President Kgalema Motlanthe, the failure was due to poor implementation of policy and budget allocation for land reform being woefully inadequate to bring about structural change. If we want to talk about economic empowerment for poor Africans, let's talk about the infamous 342 million rand Freda Dairy Farm project, meant to empower black farmers. Instead, as the public protector found, Guptas and their political partners benefited unduly. Sisulu laments the legacy of colonialism and apartheid, but says nothing of the daylight robbery of the state capture project. Thankfully, there was positive news about Estina this week. It took the government nearly 10 years, but this week it handed over the project to over 65 community members who were intended beneficiaries. This is how change happens, through hard work and good governance. Sisulu should take notice.
The briefs.
Over the past week, the homes of 2 South Africans were burgled. It's an all too common crime, but the victims, Themba Maseko and Johan van Logerberg, have something important in common. They both blew the bliss whistle at the State Commission of Inquiry into State Capture, called the Zondo Commission, as it was chaired by Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo. The first part of the report, as we've told you, was released earlier this month and details state capture. Maseko testified about how Guptas allegedly attempted to capture the government communications information system during his tenure as the department's Director General, while Van Lokeberg, a former South African Reserve Service executive, detailed how the organization was allegedly captured during Zuma's presidency. Both believe the burglaries were related to their testimonies. You may remember the murder of Babita Deokaran, a senior health department official who exposed corruption in the procurement of COVID gear. Athol Williams also testified that the commission fled the country in fear of his life. Attacks on whistleblowers are an ongoing issue in South Africa. So, what's the solution? The Zondo Commission has recommended compensating whistleblowers with a fixed percentage of any money that they help recover. Rewards are a rising trend globally. Once dismissed as a perversion for justice, the intervention has proved highly effective. Organizations have also called for the establishment of an agency that provides protection, social, psychological, for whistleblowers, News 24 reported. This support is the norm in several countries, and it's about time similar policies are created for the protectors of our democracy. What do you remember from your matric year? The acne and the teen heartbreak was enough, right? Now imagine adding rotational learning, masks, and social distancing into the mix. A big shout out then to the class of 2021. The results are out for the independent board examinations for private schools, and students received a 98% pass rate, higher than the 2020 89.2% of IEB students qualified to pursue degrees. The results of government schools will be published in newspapers tomorrow, this after the Pretoria High Court ruling in favor of AfriForum and 2 other parties, which challenged the Department of Basic Education's unilateral decision to stop publishing results publicly, citing the Protection of Personal Information Act. It's business as usual for public school matrics of 2021, who can collect their results from their schools tomorrow. So, what can we look forward to in the new year ahead? Rotational learning was supposed to be temporarily solution, which the government department wants to continue this year. But NPO, Equal Education, and other organizations say that scholars, especially those from underprivileged backgrounds, suffer more from this arrangement. They argue that the reduced restrictions, vaccinations, and a new evidence around transmissions means schools can restart full time. An academic study last year found that 750,000 students dropped out of the school during the pandemic, the highest rate since the survey started in 2002. Opinion is divided on this, but it looks increasingly like scrapping rotational learning is best. January is real, we know, but take it easy when you finally get paid next week, because both electricity and petrol hikes are on the cards. Eskom announced a proposed 20.5% electricity tariff increase for 2022 and 23, saying most of this is because of factors beyond its control, such as the requirement to increase energy purchases from independent power producers and an increase in carbon taxes. These two factors account for 13.8% of this increase. Various bodies are opposing the hike because most South Africans have taken a COVID hit to their wallets, and many are angry about mismanagement and wasteful expenditure at Eskom. We'll know for sure by the end of February when the national regulator, NERSA, must decide on Eskom's proposal. Secondly, petrol prices, which swung between high and low last year, look to be leaning towards the high side of high this year. Economists say we should expect an increase in February. Petrol prices, on the other hand, reached an all-time high in 2021. The 20 Rand litre mark we hit towards the end of the year seemed to be the lost high to us, but it is the global average. Prices in Europe soared too. A litre costs 30 Rand, and in Hong Kong it can be as much as 45 Rand. Back home, however, the petrol price is higher than most African nations. In some countries like Botswana, Ghana, it hovers around the 17 Rand per litre mark, while places like Nigeria and Angola pay 6 Rand per litre. Groundwork is a concept that is dreaded by anyone who's ever had to drag a lazy, underperforming hangers-on through a school, university, or workplace project. But it's also what underpins a successful coalition government. Pity that the ANC and EFF councillors in the city of Johannesburg seem determined to avoid it at any cost. In case you've forgotten, the city was among those with hung council after the November local government elections. As we reported at the time, the schmoozing and scrambling ensued, and the DA was pretty much forced to form a coalition to lead the city of Johannesburg with its candidate, Dr. Mpho Phalatse, donning the mayoral chain. Last week's council proceeding descending into fracas amid arguments about voting procedures. Councillors, Phalatse among them, and council staff were manhandled. Criminal charges were later laid against some EFF and ANC councillors. Neither the threat of a police investigation nor a heavy presence could prevent a repeat on Tuesday at a special council meeting called to elect committee chairs and their big boss, the impressively title of Chair of Chairs. News 24 reports that these committees help provide oversight for governing the city and the decisions taken by the mayor's executive. In other words, they ensure that councillors are working for the good of Johannesburg's residents. In the wise words of teenagers everywhere, lol. Tuesday's meeting featured numerous postponements, arguments about how voting should be done, and a walkout by EFF and ANC councillors. Just one vote was successfully completed. Congratulations or condolences, given the enormity of the task, to COPE's Colleen Makubele, who was elected unopposed as Chair of Chairs. The council will reconvene on the 27th of January to maybe elect committee chairs. It was all rather absurd, but this is no laughing matter. It's an early and alarming indication that the deposed ANC will do anything and everything in its power to hobble the coalition. That means even less service delivery to already fed up residents. If the ANC hopes to claw back votes in the Johannesburg and other metros, it needs a new strategy. If the local government election results are the bellwether, voters will punish these sorts of antics hard at the polls in 2024. Two big bits of news from the worlds of sports and arts and culture. First, the death of a trailblazing fashion guru, Andre Leon Telley, died on Mondays, aged 73. As the New York Times puts it, he shattered his industry's glass ceiling when he went from Jim Crow South to the front rows of Paris couture. Talley rose to prominence as a creative director and right-hand person to Anna Wintour from 1983 to 1995. He left Vogue to live in Paris and returned to the magazines as editor-at-large in 1998. Telley's final departure was in 2013 at the magazine. In 2022, he released a memoir detailing his time at the magazine. In his memoir, he reveals his experiences of racism, including being called Queen Kong by a publicist of a luxury fashion brand, YSL. He used his time at the Vogue magazine to be a quiet advocate fighting for representation of black models in the fashion industry. In other international news, critics of tennis superstar Novak Djokovic have called out Tennis Australia for being unusually gracious as he dealt with his visa issues in Australia. The body delayed announcing its schedule for matches while Djokovic defended his refusal to vaccinate, which is a requirement for all entering Australian borders. Critics say tennis bodies would not have extended the same grace to black athletes such as Naomi Osaka and Serena Williams, who have previously needed to be accommodated to attend to their health. In 2018, the French Open banned athletes from wearing catsuits after Williams competed in one to prevent blood clots she had been struggling with after the birth of her daughter. The Australian immigration minister cancelled Djokovic's visa last Friday, saying that his stay in Australia would incite civil unrest due to the strict vaccination campaign. What this means for Djokovic is that he misses out on his chance to challenge for his 21st Grand Slam title and 10th win at Australian Open. His deportation may also affect his ability to compete at other global competitions, as countries are reluctant to issue visas to those deported by other countries. One thing is for sure, Djokovic will have to vaccinate in order to compete, as the French Open has already told him to vaccinate to stay away from the competition. Zandile Mafe, the 49-year-old man accused of setting Parliament on fire in early January, has been released from the Valkenburg Psychiatric Hospital in Cape Town. This comes after presiding judge President Hlophe at the Western Cape High Court ruled that the referral to send Mafe to psychiatric evaluation was unlawful and that bail should be considered. The Cape Town Magistrates Court made a referral last week after a district surgeon diagnosed Mafe with paranoid schizophrenia. Hlophe had strong words about how Mafe was improperly sent for mental evaluation without having a say in the matter. Mafe is also being charged with terrorism. He was released on Wednesday but will remain in isolation after testing positive for COVID-19. His bail application will be heard on Saturday at the Cape Town Regional Court. Expect ongoing updates as this case unfolds. You probably haven't seen much Clover milk on the shopping shelves lately. Workers have been on strike for the past 9 weeks because the dairy company, which was recently taken over by an Israeli company, the Central Bottling Company in 2019, is planning to retrench and close factories. Groundup is reporting that nearly 2,000 workers would be affected. Workers picketed outside the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition in Pretoria a week ago, intensified their action this week when they stormed the offices of Joburg CBD, stormed stores in Joburg CBD, removing Clover products from the shells and leaving them in trolleys. They left pamphlets behind saying boycott Clover products. One worker said they were not there to loot. Clover said they were forced to make the cuts thanks to new trading cycle and poor economic growth. Speaking of fighting back, remember the Khois and the San fighting back against Amazon who wants to construct a 70,000 square meter headquarters on their sacred land in Cape Town? Well, those guys plus some activists took the US retail giant to the South African High Court on Wednesday to interdict the project. The case will last 3 days, but it splits the community. Some feel the project will enable more employment opportunities, while others want to protect the land they seem part of their history and home. That's it from us at The Wrap, an award-winning product of explain.co.za, simple summaries for busy people. The Wrap is sponsored by Explain's agency division. We specialize in content marketing for purpose-driven organizations, often with a pan-African reach. Mail info@explain.co.za for a quote. Remember to share the love. Tell your friends to sign up for updates at www.explain.co.za/subscribe. Till next time, goodbye from the team.